Hello everyone, welcome to this AeHIN hours. So welcome everyone. So here we will discuss about our experience in digitalization of WHO DAK. This is for one specific DAK, but it applies, I think, for other. So we'll start by what are we talking about when we are talking about DACs? So the DAC are part of the SMART guidelines, and so the SMART guidelines it's an initiative from WHO to have a standard-based, machine-readable, adaptative, requirement-based, and testable resource. So it should create a comprehensive set of reusable resource and provides 5 steps to advanced adoption. So that is clearly from the website you have below, so you can find more information. I don't know if the slide will be shared, but I will share a slide after this meeting. So you will have the link, the WHO link. The SMART guideline have those 5 steps. So here we will focus on digitalization of the DAC. So that's the output of the output will be the machine readable, but the input is a DAC. So for the ones that don't know DAC, maybe most of you do, but so it come in a form with processes, user persona, with some requirements, some data dictionary and decision logic tables. What we did in the implementation process, so I mean, as CPH, we might be involved in creating L2 but not Rukshan and myself. So we were more like in implementation of the DAC, so really making a digital version of the clinical content. Okay. So ideally, what you will expect, and that's purely our point of view from a DAC, is that a good part of the work will be done by the expert hired by WHO. So there is quite some work selecting relevant sources, so on what to do on these guidelines, and then a very high effort at WHO side to create the DAC. So what you get is kind of a PPT file, but having colleagues involved in the DAC creation, I know how much work it is. So it's very huge to have validation and approval on everything. And after you have they also generate generic L3 based on FHIR format. So for this very project, I mean, for CCC, we were also the ones that did this L3 for WHO. But here we would talk about more on our other experience for ICRC. So what you will expect is when you see the amount of work that was done prior, which is again huge, you will expect that it will kind of really ease the implementation. And in a sense, it does, because at least selecting source, you already have like a highly high quality content that is selected. The DAC is also review on the narrative format. So there's a lot of quality check that is done on the DAC. So that means when you do an implementation, indeed, you will have to make your localization. So that means that, of course, you will have to adapt the source, because if your country have local source, then you will have to take them into account, maybe deviation, maybe different treatment, and so on and so forth. So still some work, but that's normal, and you cannot do anything about that. Then about adapting the DAC. So when you select a new source, it will have impact, and therefore you need to update the different processes, the dictionary, and so on, to take into account the new source that you added on your DAC. So, but still, thanks to the work of WHO, that is eased a lot. And then it's where what we'll discuss today a bit, why and which approach we used to achieve that. You will have to create your L3 that is actually targeted for your application. So when I mentioned L3, I went a bit fast in the previous slide. So L3, it's machine readable. it means a lot of things. So the meaning we have today is more a set of configuration or code, if you like, that will be run on your L4. It can mean other. It actually a valid description of every machine readable content, but here we are really talking about something that can be deployed in the field in that presentation, and this is quite lengthy. I will go in more detail why, but overall, uh, one of the main challenges to have something that is adapted to the application that the user will use, and to do some testing. And this is actually an iterative process. So you do some digitalization of the DAC, you do some testing, you come back on the digitalization because maybe you had issue or the DAC doesn't seem right on your context. So when you see the previous slide, what I will expect personally, given the amount of work that was done prior, and what actually the effort is, it's a huge difference. That's a bit what we'll address today. Why it's a huge difference, and how we are trying to avoid that for the hopefully next implementation of this DAC we will have. Um, so regarding the conversion work challenges, um, so the actually the DAC we couldn't use really like the DAC the L3 we got from WHO. Even if we were the one involved in that, there is several reasons for that that we couldn't use it. First, during this creation of L3 Smart Gun L3, we did some tests, but we couldn't test everything because of lacking capabilities of the tool we had at this moment, and we had to use Fire, and we couldn't implement everything as it was designed in the DAC. So we knew that it's some gaps. But also the structure of the L3 that is generated, like the Fire guideline, it's very complex. And so if you want to reuse it for another language, it's not that simple. And the code is really spread over multiple documents, so kind of hard to read. The second one is the tool that the company, so ICRC, plan to use is not Fire compatible, as many tools actually. And therefore, we had to create another kind of L3 that can be used in the targeted tool. So in our case, it was CHT. It is actually. So that means that anyway, we had to redo this L3, a different version of the L3. But also, there is more concerning challenge. Even if we had a Fire tool for the implementation, it will still be challenging for two reasons. So the first is when you create a Fire resources, you have it's already an implementation on itself. You will select how the information will be displayed to some extent, on which information you want to do some logic, and so on and so forth. So that means that if you need to change any of this, you will have to regenerate anyway the Fire, even if you use Fire. There is also another aspect is when you are doing implementation, and I'm sure that plenty of you have some implementation experience, and you know that things doesn't go as planned, and what was looking fine in the paper might not be so on the final tool. And so you need to change, and those correction or feedback might not be in the DAC. So if you use an existing L3, you are not sure that it's actually completely adherent to the narrative part, and you don't know to which extent. So that's the most annoying part is you don't know where the delta may be. So That's the DAK process. So that's an image of what you can find in the DAK. So in the smart guideline layer 2 from WHO, you will have processes like that that will define how the care need to be provided. So in that example is like the main part of a consultation for a sick child, where on the top you will have some newborn, uh, then you have the infant, and then you have the child, so less than 2 months or between 2 months and 5 years old. And then they describe, different activity you need to perform one after the other. The issue is we try to use that because it gives a comprehensive approach. It's nice to use because you have a kind of an overview. It's visual, um, but it's not that easy because if you look closely, the this representation of the DAC is more an illustration. It's not complete, so there is a complex logic that you cannot find on those processes. And sometime actually the person that defines the terms on the process is not the same, or the term are changed between the times the data dictionary was done. So you might have small discrepancies. Um, and also, it's not always super clear. If I take this example, for instance, here this says for the newborn and infant, and this one too. So you don't really know which one to choose just based on that. It's still very useful. Huh? I'm not saying those processes are not useful. Don't hear me wrong. I'm just saying that it's not precise enough to base an implementation on it, but can help you to have an overview. Then we have the data dictionary. So that's a part of the DAC. There is a data dictionary, so it's all the concepts you will find in a DAC. So it can be like some question you may ask. It's actually in there. There is also some diagnostic, some findings, some observation, and so on. So all the information that will be required for the decision logic is referenced in that data dictionary. I think having a data dictionary is very critical, and it's really good that the DAC have one. So why it's critical? Because then it gives you an idea of the data element. So here you have the data element ID, and that will be the reference you will use for mapping. So if in your country you are using another kind of coding, then you need someone that need to map from the data dictionary data element ID to your own code system. And also WHO provides in the dictionary some mapping already, so it can help you to use this DAC if you have to map it with a standard code system such as Loinc, SNOMED, and so on. So same, it has really good part, but it's still challenging. As other document we have also in the DAC, so that's the decision logic. So both of those files come in the Excel format, so you can find it on the WHO website and you can download them. So this very example, it's actually an implementation one where the author choose to strike through the elements that they don't need for their implementation. So here, for instance, you see that they wanted to strike through those elements because it wasn't applicable. So how it works? So here you have the ifs. So all the different condition. Sorry, all the different conditions that, if all valid, will lead to this kind of, this is for classification, so will lead to this classification. So somehow you have a lot of information there. So now why we still have challenges for that, and the issue is, even if you have logic, sometimes it's not always clear because it's more pseudo-logic than logic. So sometimes they will say if two of those are true, and then you have like a list of something, and in other place you will have like a Boolean logic and so on. So it's kind of a mixed. So it's not, and sometime we were wondering exactly if we got it right. Um, there is also in those kind of Excel file, you have some formatted elements. So that was true for some treatment, and then Excel is not the best place to format things up, and you might lose the intended formatting. But one of the biggest challenge, because here I just show like two small snippet of files. Actually, every of those files have at least 10 tabs, and you have around 100 of line or more per tab. And the Excel format make it very, very easy to get confused. And for instance, you want to have a logical something, you select a line, a column, and maybe you missed. Maybe you took the wrong column, maybe you took the wrong line. And it sounds silly like that, but when you have like those thousands of lines to process and you are doing that every day, there is a moment where maybe you need a coffee or whatever, you can make a mistake. And that is, and so the density of information you have on Excel doesn't really help. It helps to get a lot of information on the screen, but then it also, if you spend a long time on those files, you can make mistakes. Um, there is other challenge that are maybe a bit more annoying. It's actually Excel. It might be read by a machine, but the logic is not readable per se, so it's not something processable directly, meaning that you cannot really test those Excel. So normally, as I mentioned before, part of the L3 conversion of the smart guideline, they were testing, but this happened after the publication of the DAK. So meaning that the content which is been advertised, published, may not have gone through the testing of the L3. And therefore the feedback of that testing. So sometimes you have like small issue. So because people are spending a lot of energy to have a quality DAC, there is not so much, but still given the size of the DAC, you still have some. And because it's not testable, I will be honest, it's perfectly normal. I will personally, I will do more mistakes than they did because it's very a huge file and it's very easy to miss something. And because it's not testable, you don't have any way to check the quality of those files, but just reading those thousand, more than thousand, 10 of thousands of cells. So as I mentioned also, that's another aspect is so the goal of those files is to be for human, meaning that actually the logic, the way it presents, so what we have here, it might be clear, but if you turn that as is in a software, it won't be very performant because you might just have end condition on the first line and or end condition on the second line and so on and so forth. If, for example, for this classification, sorry, this very severe disease where you have several lines, it's basically or, it's and between column and or. And so if you just like add up everything, it creates a valid logic if there is no error, but really not optimized logic. And when you go to production, when you go to user, you need speed. And that could be also a challenge. And what was really it's also what I mentioned a bit before, but what was really annoying for us, it's only partially machine readable. So you can have scripts that go through it, but at some point those scripts will fail because there is no check on machine readability of those files. Because they are L2, they are not L3, so they are theoretically not made to be machine readable. But so basically, there is mapping, as I mentioned, to SNOMED, to LUINC, and so on. But they don't have like a standardized approach. So sometimes you have two code in one cell, sometimes you have one, and this kind of thing. So if you want to do mapping, then it's you'll have to do extra work. So you have to know it, and when you know it, you have to be careful. Um, the- so as I mentioned, it's pseudologic. So the logic defined here, there is no validation. There is no syntax validation. So you might have typos, or just like symbols that are not computer symbol, but more like for display, like superior or equal. For instance, you have like the version of Word that if you paste that to any software, it will fail because it will expect to have two characters. And also there is also like a disturbing way of managing information in those files, in the sense that sometimes they use indentation from one line to another. If the text starts a bit later, it means that actually it's kind of a children of the line above. So that a computer cannot know. I mean, if you can implement that, but it's very likely to fail because if so, for some other reason you have space and it can be misinterpreted. Um, and the worst, I would say, the list, the last one for those file, last challenge is the worst. It's in order to be human readable, when they create logic, as you can see here, they are using like danger sign equal yes. So you can say it's fine for human and it's look like machine readable. The reality is on the not for danger sign, but for example for diarrhea. On the data dictionary, you have several elements that are called diarrhea. You have the signs, the symptoms, and you have the signs and symptoms, and maybe diagnostic too. I mean, we don't have diagnostic for on CCC for that, but you will have at least signs and symptoms, which are different concepts, and so you don't know which one to map because it just written diarrhea on the decision logic. So it means that when you implement those DAK, you must be careful on which concept you are using, and if it's just an IT like myself with a little clinical training that is doing that alone, it might make mistakes because I mean, after years of working in the field, now I make the difference. But if it's a junior person, then between the sign and symptom, it's not so clear. So there is also a small challenge that we had to face during implementation. So taking the DAC content and using it, it's a lack of illustration. So when you actually want to deploy something, you will need to have like a visual representation, especially for disease like skin disease. So it's really it could be very important to display to the user what you mean by this or that label. And in the DAC, you don't have those. So that means that you will have to find it, which is not that simple, because it will be content that you will have to publish, meaning that you need to have the right on the images, and that can take time. So there is other things that are a bit more subtle, I will say. Um, it's not they have like a little conceptualization of the content. What I mean by that is, for instance, I will use another DAC. I checked recently, it's the immunization DAC. So they will give you, okay, assess if the child need immunization, and you will have a decision logic to do that. The thing is, when do you do that? And there is no you won't do that for everyone. You won't do that at every time of a consultation because it might not make sense if the person come for an emergency or such. So, and this is what I call the blueprint. I will show an example of what we are trying to implement later on, but so there is no those kind of hooks entry point for the care guidelines. Um, there is also no capability listed with the DAC. And actually, when you have to use existing system, we are not an IT company per se, so we don't develop L4. We are not developing CHT. We use in the past ComCare. We are not developing ConCare and so on. So we are using existing systems that have limited capabilities. But when you take a DAC, you have to go through to find out which capabilities you will need in your system. And for instance, in CCC, sometimes they say, oh, you need to jump from A to B. So your system, you need to have a way to do that. You need to retrieve patient history for some, I mean, most of them. But so you need to do that, or you need to adapt the DAK to avoid it. Or simply you need Z scores, and then your system need to provide this kind of thing. And you don't have that, so sometimes it can be challenging. You can start some work on having an application in mind and realize at some point that, oh, it might be very challenging actually to use this application because it doesn't have the capability I need. But the lack of conceptualization also is in the data dictionary. The data dictionary, I mean, I can go back a bit here. You don't see kind of a class of concept. There is no, I mean, normally the normal one has much more columns, but you can check there is no conceptual, there is no concept class. And actually, the concept class is when you have a concept like diarrhea, you need to say, okay, this is a symptom, this is a sign, this is a diagnostic, or simply this. It's a way to ask some information or question, and you don't have that, and that has two impacts. Huh? I mean, more than two. So the first is that means that the implementer, if it saves that to the patient record, will have to decide how to save it. So hopefully it's good enough to do it right. But if it does it wrong, then if you want to exchange information with other systems, they might not understand because maybe the other system will have a different data classification, I mean, concept class, and so the system won't match. They won't understand that it's the same data. But what is more, I would say, annoying is. So the WHO is really clear that the DAK are not questionnaires. So the way you present the information is up to the implementers. I had several discussions with them, and I think that's a crystal clear point for them. Nevertheless, sometime in the decision logic, you will have questions that are used. So, to illustrate, a question could be, what are the sign of what are the main complaints of the patient? And this is actually a question because then from an health IT point of view, if you say e-report cough, then you will have to save on the patient record that there is a symptom cough. And you won't have something like a main reason of consultation cough. No, you will log symptom cough for this encounter. And when you, because also one system might ask this question, another system actually it's part of your EM or your hospital management system, and there is no such question. It's recorded in another manner, and so having the question in the decision logic then won't work if you never ask this question in that way, but also with those options. And that means that you kind of stuck to a way of collecting data. Um, and and so that's I mean we didn't change it for our case because we are really adherent to the DAC. But if you need to change the way the question are asked, then you because they didn't classify. It's not my understanding of it. They didn't classify the data, and therefore in the decision logic they use question instead of only information from the electrical medical record, then you will have to update the logic if you change the way you ask questions. So that's a bit a summary of what is our experience on that. So I mean, I focus on the challenges. Of course, again, I want to make it very clear. There is a lot of valuable content in them, and okay, we could also praise what they did. So, but here with limited time, I focus on challenge because other implementer will face the same. So how we try to solve that because we might have similar implementation and we don't want to reinvent the wheel every time. So we try to develop an approach that will help us in the future. And also we are trying to push, I mean, to get more people adopting this as approach so we could share content and reduce the overall cost of deployment of CDSs. So basically, how we address that content is we took the WHO and then we put it in some of visual authoring tools. So the idea is to have you get what you see from the visual content. So we are authoring the visual content in a BPM and lag. So we are using Draw.io because it's open source for now, but maybe in the future we'll use some other system, which is completely agnostic. So there is no FHIR or CHT, MEDI, CODK technology. So it's agnostic. And then we have a tool that will transform it to, today we support two, which are close enough. So Medic, so CHT Medic and ODK. But because it's completely agnostic to the solution, we should be able to support more. We didn't have opportunity to support more so far, but hopefully we will. And when we design it, it's actually based on a care blueprint that I will display just next slide. And when we define the content, we always define the content one activity at a time. So the idea is to have something which is small enough, so in a few seconds you understand what the activity does, and then you put activity in activity in activity. So you have the logic that's kind of a drill down approach from the overall care flow to like a more detailed care flow. So our blueprint, we are trying to, I mean, it's, try and error. So we are trying to use this kind of approach so far, where we have like a sequence of entry points, where we design some, so each of those are segments, and then we design the content. We are mapping the content from the DAK to one of those segments. So we are using only the green one, so that's kind of the ideal blueprint we have, and the tool, the red one are not even supported for the tool so far. So the difference is what you have is really like a normal kind of questionnaire-based consultation, kind of what we support today, and the red one are more like planning and update asynchronously from consultations or emergency care. So the difference you have here between the one in consultation and the other one is we believe that it's important to distinguish what you might give to all the patients and what actually the care worker need to select. For instance, a care worker that have no that is not doing pediatrics, then there's little value to show any information on pediatrics. So that's why we have this blue box. It's like the care worker need to say, okay, I want to do this kind of guidelines today. So the CDSS. But nevertheless, it could be interesting also in some case to add information without the people selecting. For instance, if you have a patient that children that is due for immunization, maybe it will be interesting to, before the care worker select any care guideline, say, oh, by the way, this person might have some immunization due, and so please select the immunization guideline. And then if the care worker can do it, he will be able to select it. But for some reason, like it is not trained for that, or it doesn't have the drugs and so on, we will skip and maybe advise the patient to go to a colleague. So that's a bit the blueprint we are trying to make. We are always open to feedback on that. So what does visual authoring brought? So we did it because it's less error prone, because once you define those activity, I will show some example later on. Actually, you do some update, you process it, because the content we have, as I show, is processed by a tool called Trick. So you do something, you process it, and it says if it can process it. So if there is error, like missing reference or something, it will tell you, and so you can fix it correctly. Also, because it creates the content that you can actually test on a tablet or on a website and so on directly, so you can do the change, process it, and test it directly without having a specialist doing the conversion. Of course, it also like streamlining the conversion, because when you have when the tool know how to process some kind of some kind of design, then it will do always the same way, and so you will have like coherence in the way you transform something, but also if a mistake is solved, then it will be solved for every similar context. Um, so that when you do the first initial modification, initial creation, but also when you do modification later on, then you can edit it, and it's somehow similar to like an iteration. So you remove, for example, malaria if you don't need it in your context, and then you process it. If you remove malaria from the CCC DAK, for instance, it will fail because it expects to have some malaria information in some calculation. So it will tell you that it cannot process, it cannot go further, and this is blocked, and so you will have to find out which one are blocked and fix them. And the idea is that is during development of your content. So you don't push those errors down to the tester or to the field. You see them before. So it avoids like the application crashing in front of the user. It has other benefits. So it generates a data dictionary in a usable format, so FIRE format or OCL format. And so you can reuse the mappings that were done on the DAK for your context. Also, I mentioned that it was possible, so we can actually make pipelines. So when you push on GitHub or on any versioning system, it can actually start conversion to check that your content is correct or at least possible. So that ensure quality to some extent. And then also I mentioned the activity. I will show an example, but the activity approach where we define things with a small scope at a time really help us to reuse. So I will, for instance, we had to split the content in two, and we were able to reuse some of the activity. So avoiding duplication, it's less work. That's so cheaper, but also it enables you to, when you make a modification, to ensure that the modification is actually pushed everywhere. So as a result, so that's just, I mean, some examples. So that's an overall for Yi, for instance, where you can see that we have every upside down house are like activity. So that's an overall, and that it says that you do these activities and this activity. So this one is not the simplest we have, but still with like a minute or two, you can get the idea on how the consultation is ordered. And if you have, and you can keep actually the same one with various context, because you might need to change only the detail of an activity, and the overall might remain the same. So that's an example of activity. We have like more than 40 activities for CCC. I don't have to count them, but so basically you have really simple activities. So this one is for diarrhea dehydration. But you have more complex ones. So the one on the right is about skin, where you have a lot of image and quite some logic. And every box you have here, and same for severe derivation and so on, have some logic behind it. So processable logic, unlike the DAK. Our result is basically we managed to import the DAK almost at 100%. So there is some remaining aspect because the scope we had from RCRC was not to use like historical data. So we didn't use historical data. So in that sense, we are not fully adherent, but that was part of the implementation constraint. But for most of the activity, we did import them. We also went further for the drugs. Really what is interesting is we did face technical challenge with the tool. So it was not something that processing such complex things, we didn't foresaw everything. So we adapt the tool along the way. But nevertheless, once we adapt the tool, the feature was in the tool. So the next time it happened, the next time we need some features, it was already there, and we didn't have to develop it. And we didn't have to do the conversion. So that's most important. So of course the tool wasn't perfect. So we did find issue, but because it's very easy to test, actually we're able to find, I hope, all the issues. And now the tool is stable. So now we we don't, when there is an issue, it's basically on the drawing, and therefore we can focus on content and not on error created during conversion. And again, for the implementer in the room, I think you understand what I mean by that. When you convert something, you can make mistakes. Huh? We work like in iteration. So usually we're about to make a release every week. So sometimes it was in few days, sometimes it was in 2 weeks. But the iteration is quite short. Um, I mean, also, despite our best effort to do the import of the DAK in the drawing, we found mistakes. We made error, and so we had so this iteration, the speed of iteration was really critical to have the correction fast. And later in the process, actually we were asked to split it in two by age range, and because of what I mentioned about shareability, reusability, it actually took only a week to Dr. Rukshan to do that split. And then in a week, we had like 2 different guidelines, one for young infant, one for child. Try to do that if you don't have this kind of agnostic authoring tool, it will take you much more time. Overall, the project was less than 6 months to do this migration, using CHT. And you can find links here. So basically, ICRC allow to share the content. So you have the GitHub from ICRC where you have those draw.io. You have also the care guideline published by WHO on which we base on content. And again, there is a lot of good work here. We have the conversion tool we are using, which is also open source. And this is a small demo video if you want to try out this kind of authoring tool. And that's it for me. Thank you for listening. And if you have question, we can move to question.
Thank you, Sir Patrick. We have a few questions here in the chat box and in the Q&A box. Dr. Rukshan, you can also chime in if you'd like to answer. So let's read the first set of questions. These are from Dr. Alvin Marcelo. So are these challenges temporary and surmountable in a matter of time and with dedicated developers?
Maybe Rukshan on conversion, because I think the challenge are the conversion challenge from the WHO files. So that's, I mean, if you cannot speak Rukshan, I will answer, but I think you are better placed for that.
Yes, thank you so much, Alvin, for the question. So yes, in time, things would get better. We are still at the early stage of smart guidelines. We only have to publish smart guidelines at the moment, HIV and the clinical care in crisis that we developed. Two other DAKs are in development, so the technologies are still new, and these challenges with more tooling and more knowledge amongst the community, these challenges would get less in time. And one big challenge that we also found during the process is translation, because these digital adaptation kits are mainly published in English, and we had to translate them into other languages as well. So that was one of the biggest challenges that we had. And we also had to develop a way to automate the translation, because like Patrick said, the Excel files are really huge and the content is really large. So if we have to translate it by hand, it would take a really long time. So we had to develop some tools to automate the translation process as well. But the challenges are there, but they are there because the technology is still new. But with time, I'm sure things would get better with more adaptation and more tooling and more knowledge.
And also that's why we developed this approach of visual authoring tool, is to have some kind of more structure. So it will bring constraint to kind of avoid those issues to the ones that want to use those content, because when you have a fully processable content, then you don't need to take the Excel file. You can actually tweak directly the draw.io file or whatever format you want to use. And that's what we are trying to advocate to WHO, is to actually do a step further in the processability of the content to avoid having those challenge because every implementer will have to. So the problem is today is like as the DAK is shared, every implementer will face the same challenge because there are some limitation of the DAK.
Thank you, Dr. Rukshan and Sir Patrick. There are other two questions here from Dr. Alvin as well. So aren't the concept classes already built in SNOMED or any of the code systems? And can we just delegate the concept hierarchy to the code system rather than in FHIR?
WHO create a code system. So that's what the data dictionary, you can see it as a code system. Because not every concept is mapped to SNOMED or LUINC. So there is some that have like fuzzy mapping. So yes, somehow for the ones that are mapped, we could get the concept class from those. But it's a bit the chicken and the egg because it's a terminology that did the mapping, and there are also human people that could do mistakes. And so if they didn't have the concept class to start with, maybe also the mapping has suffered of it. So I don't know if I answered the question. I hope I did.
Thank you, Sir Patrick. The question from Sir Jai is, have you published this implementation experience or plan to do so? I think it will be helpful for those who might implement to know how to navigate the challenges you face and how they could get around.
So, no, we didn't publish. It's a matter of lack of time. Regarding the challenge, as I mentioned, we are advocating with WHO team to change a bit the approach to avoid those challenges in the first place. So I think it's where it will be the most useful. But we are also in parallel having this visual authoring initiative where we try to put together people that think it's a good solution because maybe it's not, and to build content together and to build a better tools that answer to more use cases.
Thank you, Sir Patrick. Our next question is also from Sir Jai. So one of the core focus areas for us in AeHIN is capacity building and training of health workforce. As an implementer, what are your suggestions to AeHIN towards capacity building on this topic? Possibly also suggest specific areas which we might need to focus.
I think there are several points. So I will leave Rukshan about because we developed some training cards. So, but that's a bit aside of the DAK. So based on the solution, our solution is basically create like decision logic trees for that would transform to questionnaire. So we could also make training card based on the same technology. So we did that. So Rukshan might elaborate a bit on that. So that's targeted for the health force. Then for the health specialist, health IT specialist, it's it's very difficult to answer because it depends what technology you have in your hospital. I really like Fire, so don't get me wrong, but Fire is really good for exchanging data. To run CDSS, I'm not convinced. Even if they make like super progress on the Fire workflow, running Fire on a non-native Fire system, I'm not convinced. And therefore, you need somehow expert in the hospital management system, the tool that the health worker are actually using. So I'm sorry, it's a non-answer. Rukshan, maybe on training card and
Yes, and also one of the challenges that WHO is having in adaptation of these guidelines are the lack of capacity in the regions to adopt the published implementation guide to customize it into the country-specific context. So it's really important that areas or countries have developed their capacity within them to use these guidelines, develop their knowledge in FHIR, smart guidelines, CQL. So natively in these countries, they can reuse the content published by WHO and straight away integrate them into their health information systems. And because these guidelines are already published, it saves a lot of time for developers. They don't have to redevelop the wheel again. They don't have to develop these guidelines, this clinical logic into their EMRs or health information systems. They can reuse these WHO published guidelines, which saves a lot of time. after customizing it to the country-specific context. So it's really important for countries to develop their capacity in smart guidelines and fire, which should in turn long-term save a lot of time.
Yes, there is also, I mean, or you see that there is a need to have a more accessible approach. So even our solution we have today, it's a bit IT, a bit tricky, I would say. There is, and one of the visual authoring initiative is actually to try to bring together enough people so we can have a tool that is actually usable by clinician with some sense of IT, and then to have like really the goal to lower the bar for training health specialists. Personally, it took me like a month to get a good mastery of fire. So if you want to go fire, that might be costly and with a turnover. So if you invest like 6 months a year on someone and he left because now he has a marketable skill, that can be also very annoying and really challenging for you guys. So that's also why I'm biased toward visual authoring, because I think it lowers the bar and we could have like really specialists that create the conversion tool and then like matter experts to create the content itself. Just to answer the question, last question of Kate, no, we don't take, so it creates, so the trick, because we are using CHT as a tool, so the tool creates XLS form that then we can push on CHT or ODK, but it really reads the DrawIO files.
Yes, thank you, Sir Patrick, also for reading and answering the last questions from Sir Keith. Before we close, I'd like to call on our Executive Director, Sir Jai, for the closing.
Thank you, Patrick and Rukshan. It was very interesting. I think it is also very, very valuable for our members to hear from implementers. So this is an experience of someone who has done it, and then probably having heard you that it will also help them to get around the issues. One of the questions that I asked is about publishing, and then of course, like AeHIN being someone who specializes or focuses in capacity building in the region, like, we are interested to actually build on this experience from you, and then also help implementers like you to do it better. That's the reason that that the questions also were there. And then I would like to thank you both for sharing this. And then, like, of course, like this will be the first webinar coming from the Swiss TPH team for us. And then there are a few things to follow. With that, like, I would like to again thanks everyone, and then I think we are on the top of the hour. To add you, I think this webinar is also coming at a time. I think the timing could not have been better. I know there is also a technical working group that's focusing on capacity building and training for smart guidelines. So I think the webinar is also coming at a very, very appropriate time. So I think the feedback from here, the questions, the responses, and then the challenges, I think probably could flow to that technical working group. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.